Riverboat 99.1 FM.
Furby's 99.5 FM. Kiteshare Radio.
COVID-19 tips sponsored by Dex Soap. 1. Practice social distancing. 2. Wear your mask when leaving the house. 3. Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds using our Dex Soap. 4. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Choose Dex Soap for that extra cleanliness. Dex Soap is affordable and available nationwide.
It is 19 hours 30 and it is time to enter room 592 where we unleash the truth with Dr. Yog Mahadeo at the helm of this evening's program and his co-host Pablo Escobar sporting his newly shaved mustache this evening, or as you may know him better as Mr. Leonard Gildarie of Kiteshare News. This evening their esteemed guest Mr. Kamal Ramkarran, and we await the presence of Pauline Chase. But in the meantime, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. And while Yog is joining us there, I don't know why he's allowing these guys to take so much leverage, so much leg room in Kiteshare Radio.
Hours 31 in Guyana, and it is time to enter room 592 along this evening at the helm of the program as usual, Dr. Yog Mahadeo and his partner in crime, Mr. Leonard Gildarie, sporting his freshly shaved mustache and a little bit of a goatee, looking a bit like Pablo Escobar. Please be careful out there on the roads, Mr. Leonard Gildarie and their esteemed guests this evening, Mr. Kamal Ramkarran, and we await the presence of Pauline Chase. But in the meantime, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening, Mr. Kevin Smith. And, you know, I like those smart comments at the top of the show. And I must say, Leonard, good try. It's not going to work. Nobody could ever mistake you for Mr. Escobar. I'm kidding, my brother. I'm kidding. But ladies and gentlemen, let us say thanks to the Kiteshare Radio crew, the technical team, and the management and staff of Kiteshare Radio for making this program a possibility. Good night to one and all across Guyana, the Caribbean, and wherever you're joining us from, North America. And of course, we have our friends in Norway, in Europe, in UK, all around the world, literally, Leonard. We have had viewers from all around the world joining us, and not forgetting the Caribbean countries as well. How are you tonight, Leonard?
Don't hurt me. Pretty good there, Yoga, and I want to say welcome to Kong's.
Why did Kevin say "Don't hurt me" when you were about to speak?
You know, lately, I want to believe that yourself and the boys in the studio here, they're conspiring against me, and I have absolutely no idea why. I've been such a nice person. I haven't cursed anybody. I haven't done anything. But I'm going to behave myself tonight because the good Kongs is in the house, and I think he'd be telling us a lot of things, how to behave, how to don't behave, and of course he's going to say to the politicians what they should be doing too.
Great. And so, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to room 592, where we unleash the truth. And tonight we are being joined by Mr. Kamal Ramkarran. We expect our other guest, Ms. Pauline Chase, to join us. However, we are aware that Ms. Chase also has some commitments with the Bar Association of Guyana, and given their statements and all of that, we expect, but we look forward to her presence here tonight, and we really expect that. But in the meanwhile, we'll continue with our discussion with Mr. Ramkarran, who, as you know, has been representing a lot of thoughts, albeit from a legal perspective, but a lot of thoughts of what is happening in Guyana. Mr. Ramkarran, welcome to Room 592, sir.
Thank you, Yog, and thank you, Leonard, for having me again.
Thank you.
And Kamal, I must say to you just before we get going that yes, you will have to join our crew because Leonard just mentioned the word conspiracy. And I think the only conspiracy that is taking place tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and for the past 100 and how much nights now, Leonard?
It's more than
it's been going on. Yeah, it's been going on for a very long time. It's one conspiracy after another. First, we started with, not having a date for elections. If one would recall those days in 2019, when Mr. Granger said, well, I don't know when GCOM would be ready. And of course, he put poor Mr. Patterson to run GCOM, who could have never been ready for elections. Anyway, we fast forwarded, we got to elections eventually, and then it was one problem or the other. And today, Leonard, Mr. Gildarie and taxpayers of this country, I want you to know that the Guyana Rag, also known as the Guyana Chronicle, the Guyana Rag has published a photo of Mr. Lowenfield wrapped in the Guyana flag behind him and saying, we got your back. And so I think that is a statement, a terrible statement coming from a newspaper. Of course, they're going to claim that it is a paid advertisement. I want to see who paid for that advertisement as a taxpayer of this country, because I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it is a crying shame to see a state paper telling somebody who is now taken to court for criminal charges to say, we got your back. And Leonard, only during elections watch today, we were talking about the possibility of a presidential pardon if APNO AFC remains in power for anything that Lowenfield and Mingo and Mango and everybody else did during these processes. And that is certainly one of the possibilities or probabilities we'd like to ask counsel his opinion of. However, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow is the CCJ's decision that will be handed down on this matter. I want to share this thought with you all. A lot of hype has been made about this day tomorrow and what CCJ will do, can do, would do, and can't do. However, it does not, cannot, and can never change the fact that Lowenfield and GCOM has to act in accordance with the law. Nobody can rewrite these laws. Votes can only mean valid votes, and all the shenanigans to prolong these elections are continuing. We have heard what Mike Pompeo said a week ago. We have heard the new news coming out about persons being threatened, but it seems like the incumbent doesn't care. I want to remind all of you, APNO AFC wants to stay in power at all costs. These are my personal views, and please do not attribute these views to our good counsel in-house. He will probably make his own disclaimer later. APNO AFC wants to stay in power at all costs, ladies and gentlemen. The oil money is going to be locked away. Even the mighty Maduro tried to get his goal and couldn't get it recently. The UK High Court locked that away from Venezuela. So imagine what would happen to us for any of our exports. It's not going to come to Guyana. The only thing APNO and AFC can do to you and I is to increase our taxes. They have done so for the past 5 years, bled this country dry. And that is what this government will do. The same government that upon taking office, within a month of taking office, they increased their own salaries first. And what did Mr. Harman say? I have no apologies to make. This is a set of persons that wants to stay in power at all costs. And tonight, we'll continue to reveal and unleash the truth about what lengths people are going to go to interpret the laws and the Constitution to suit their purposes. Regardless of which side of the political divide they are on, Guyanese must not be abused by politicians' personal view as to the limit to the stretches of their power. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome Mr. Ramkarran once more to our program here tonight. And I want us to take the discussion as to what is likely outcome for tomorrow. Mr. Ramkarran, sir, you being in the hot seat tonight, from our perspective, we see the possibilities of CCJ starting on the outset to say we decide we have no jurisdiction. Zada, zilch, nothing, back at square one. Tell us what's the outcome if that were to be the eventuality. The second option is, of course, they may find they have jurisdiction, but may very well endorse what the COA would have decided. And Mr. Ramkarran, with that possibility, all of this money that this current government has spent to beat up and criticize the CCJ, what if the CCJ rules and adopts or endorses or what's the legal term for what the COA has done? And thirdly, of course, the third option, if it goes against what the Court of Appeal would have decided. Over to you, sir, if you can take us through the steps in your own logical way.
Well, the first thing I would say, Yog, is that we have to recognize that the CCJ is, first of all, a Guyanese court. It's not a foreign court. This court is a Guyanese court. It's our final court of appeal. It might be in Trinidad, and it might be peopled by persons who are not Guyanese, but it is a Guyanese court. That is the first thing that we must understand and appreciate. It's not a foreign court trying to interfere with our sovereignty. It is our court. And that court has had as judges former Chancellor Desiree Bernard. She was a judge of the CCJ, as our Guyanese judge. And there was another Guyanese judge who is now at UGA, Duke Pollard, Professor Duke Pollard. He was there for a number of years. So while there are no Guyanese on the court at the moment, that doesn't mean it is not a Guyanese court. These are our Caribbean brothers and sisters who are at the top of their game in their professional lives. There are professors. Justice Winston Anderson is a professor. He has a PhD from Cambridge, I believe. Justice Rajnath Lee got a first-class degree. She was, I think, the best in her class. She was a judge in the Court of Appeal. Justice Saunders was the Chief Justice acting of the Eastern Caribbean. So these are not ordinary people judging us. These are people who are of the highest caliber, people who are of the highest mettle. So that's the first thing we must realize. And what they do, their decisions are based on the law. And in terms of law, they're not just ordinary lawyers practicing law. They have the learning and the years of experience and the materials, the books and so on, the training to allow them to make decisions which us ordinary lawyers can only marvel at. So we have to understand and appreciate this about the Caribbean Court of Justice. It's not a foreign court here to decide on elections. This is a court deciding on what the law is, what the law should be. So that's the first thing I'll say at the outset. We also have to be careful that we don't say things which could unduly criticize the court or something that could things that could lead us into contempt of court by saying this is what the court should do and this is what the court should not do. And if the court does this or does not do this, it would be wrong and making an error. We doing things like that are a contempt of court. And we've seen this all over the place. The Bar Association, the Bar Council, of which I am a vice president, one of two vice presidents, has issued a statement about a full-page advertisement in the Trinidad Guardian, obviously seeking to influence the court, and if not influence the court, to turn public opinion away from the court if it makes some decision which does not accord with that advertisement. I don't know if you've seen it, Job, and if your viewers have seen it, and Leonard, I don't know if you've seen it. But these are the things that are happening. So we have to stay clear of that sort of thing. Well, you want to discuss what the options are. As you said, the first option is that the court, the CCJ, could find that it has no jurisdiction. It could say that the Constitution says that there is no appeal from this sort of decision under Article 1774, and we do not accept that we have jurisdiction, and therefore the Court of Appeal decision, whether it is right or wrong, stands. And if that is the case, what the Court of Appeal has done is that the Court of Appeal has ruled that the word votes, more votes cast, means more valid votes. That's what the Court of Appeal has said. But as Justice Witt, I believe it was, said during the hearing, what else can, and everybody else has said so, what else can votes cast mean? Surely it doesn't mean invalid votes, fraudulent votes. It has to mean valid votes. And as Justice Jamadar said, doesn't the qualitative analysis happen when the votes are counted? Not when the declaration is being made. It happens when the votes are being counted. When the votes are being cast, and uncounted, both cast and counted. When you come to vote, you have to have certain criteria. You have to satisfy certain criteria. You have to have your ID card. If you don't have your ID card, you have to answer certain questions. There's a folio. You must look like the person in that folio. And if, of course, you don't have your ID card, you should say, when is your mother's date of birth, or some other question the presiding officer can ask you. Mm-hmm. You have to be on the list. Mm-hmm. There are political agents there looking and scrutinizing to ensure that no fraud happens. So there is the qualitative analysis. Then when the votes are counted at the polling station, another qualitative analysis is done. They determine whether the votes cast are valid or they're invalid. If it is marked for more than one list, they will reject it. If it is marked in a way that the voter can be identified, like if I put my name next to my vote, they will reject it. If it is not marked for any list, they will reject it.
Correct.
So those are the periods when the qualitative analysis is done. When the declaration is made, it's not a time for analyzing the type of votes. It is a time for analyzing the number of votes. So that is what Justice Jamadar said. So if the Court of Appeal, I've gone through a long digression there. If the CCJ says that the Court of Appeal, we do not have jurisdiction to deal with the Court of Appeal's decision, then we go back to the situation where the votes cast means valid votes, which is what they always meant.
Right.
So we know what valid votes mean.
Right.
So we know that there has been a recount, there has been a count, and there has been a recount. And in that count and in that recount, the votes cast, which were counted and recounted, were valid votes. And therefore, the numbers revealed by the recount have to be used in order to make the declaration.
Right.
If there's a problem with what somebody has a problem, there are allegations that people who had died turned out to vote, and people who had migrated while they were in the country where they migrated to voted, then those are matters which you take your evidence and you go to court on an elections petition. You go to the High Court on an elections petition. So that's the first instance. If the CCJ says it has no jurisdiction, we return to the position we are in today, where we have recount numbers and we have numbers from the count, and we know what those numbers are.
So Kamal, regardless of how, let us just say hypothetically, if the CCJ says A, it has no jurisdiction, or B, it throws out the Court of Appeal's decision and say votes always meant inherently valid votes, and so you don't need to qualify votes at the level of the Constitution. It still does not remove a man who might be bent on mischief to say, okay, if votes means only valid votes, I will interpret to do so, which is what Lowenfield has done. So the qualification of the word votes as applied by any court, whether that literal qualification exists or not, may or may not change his course of action. I mean, there's nothing that constrained or constrains Lowenfield from using the recount report except for Lowenfield's own purposeful decision, isn't it?
Correct. Now, so let's look at that report that Mr. Lowenfield issued. He said in his letter that he was issuing this report in furtherance of the decision of the Court of Appeal, right? So he relied on the decision of the Court of Appeal when they said votes mean valid votes, and then he issued this report throwing 115,000 votes away. But when the Court of Appeal issued its decision, it also issued a stay of that decision for 3 days. And when he gave his report, that stay was still in effect.
Mhm.
The CCJ then put a stay into effect from the time the case was filed, which continues today. So, how could Mr. Lowenfield be doing something in furtherance of something which did not exist?
So let me ask you this question. If Lowenfield prepared his last report using as part of his reports the direct reference to the Court of Appeal's decision, is it Counsel Kamal Ramkarran's opinion that if that is taken away by the CCJ, it means that he has to now change course and go back to the recount results, or is there a possibility he still can do his mischief?
Okay, if we assume that the Caribbean Court of Justice sets aside the decision of the Court of Appeal, if they say the decision of the Court of Appeal was wrong and it no longer stands, then Mr. Lowenfield has no basis for that report. Already he has no basis for the report.
Correct.
Already the report is a nullity because there is at the moment no Court of Appeal decision. Well, at the time when he issued his report, there was no Court of Appeal decision and he could not issue it since then because there was a stay from the time the CCJ put the stay in. So,
but Kamal, sorry to interject, but the basis upon him making a singular decision as to what vote is valid and what is not valid has to be something that can only be determined by a court. It cannot be determined by a man who thinks he is judge, jury, and executioner. In other words, there is no logic that has been presented, as far as we are aware, to say here is how he arrived at burning 15,000 votes, is there?
not only is there no logic, Yog, there's also no law. What does he base it on? None of us know what he based that throwing away of 115,000 votes on. How does he determine? What evidence did he use? And what law authorized him to use that evidence to determine that these votes could have been thrown away? How does he do so? Whose votes did he throw away? Did he throw away mine or yours? Or how did he decide which ones to throw away, which ones were valid and which ones weren't valid? And how does he know? Do we have this information?
That's true. That's true. And Kamal, the issue I think a lot of Guyana has is that, you know, while I'm putting you on a spot here because you cannot put yourself in their minds, of course, but one wonders that if the CCJ rules tomorrow to set aside the Court of Appeal decision, what next might Mr. Lowenfield come up with? In hindsight, even though nowadays that seems to be a hackneyed phrase as well, I got to find a new word to use. If one were to rethink his position, would you 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago have foreseen Lowenfield doing this? Counsel, I'm putting you in a hard spot by asking you, is there any other little hole that he can crawl into and pervert something else and say, here is another report and I got rid of 140,000 votes this time?
Well, if he does that, it's going to be as lawful as this one. It's going to be unlawful. So, because what is the basis that he's arriving at these decisions? We don't know. What law allows him to do this? We don't know. No law exists.
Remember, Lowenfield has said that nobody can instruct him. The same Lowenfield who in 2019 said that GCOM has to instruct him. We have a video of that. This same guy has said in 2020 that nobody could tell him how to do his work. Counsel, based on your knowledge of the law, is that accurate?
Well, you know, there's an old maxim, Yog, be you ever so high, the law is above you. The law applies to every single person, whoever they are. Mr. Lowenfield, the president, the prime minister, members of cabinet, they apply to people in high statuses and they apply to people in low statuses. The law applies to everybody and it is to be applied equally to everybody. There's no special law for Mr. Lowenfield and a different law for Mr. Gildarie. Law applies to us all. Now, the Constitution, either the Constitutional Representation of the People Act, I can't remember which it was, says quite clearly that the commission, that the secretariat is subject to the guidance of the commission. So how does he come? Well, first of all, he said in 2019 that he was subject to the guidance of the commission. Whatever he did was subject to the instruction and guidance of the commission. How does he determine that he is no longer subject to the guidance of the commission? Has to be subject to the guidance of the commission.
And I
So
want
in
to.
your mind, yes, go on, Leonard. Go.
Yes, I want to take you a different line here. The Schumann's party, Lennox Schumann's party, has asked GCOM to remove low and feel and has cited 12 cases. Is there anything that is stopping GCOM at the moment, or even the chair, from convening a meeting to probably remove him just to ensure that there isn't any problems with regards to what is coming up?
I don't see any problem if he determines on his own to throw 115,000 votes away without regard to any law that allows him to do so, to make that determination. And that seems to me like gross misconduct. And GCOM ought to be able to take steps to protect itself from its employees committing gross misconduct. He said he was a constitutional officer, but he's not a constitutional officer.
And taking off your lawyer's hat here, would it have been a good move by GCOM at this moment to probably preempt what is likely to come? Because if it is that they don't want any more delays or any more dilly-dally and whatever word, I think Sanjeev would have used some other words to describe that. Would it not be a good idea now for GCOM to probably take a preemptive strike?
To remove him?
Yes.
I think that that is available to GCOM from the time the report was made. That was available to GCOM, but that possibility, I think that prudence dictates that they will wait and see what the court says. If the court has any comments about the report or what the court says, perhaps it can make it stronger, perhaps not. But in any event, whatever the court says, the possibility is there for GCOM next to move that the CEO did something which was insubordinate to the instructions of the chairman. The chairman said, I want you to prepare your report in accordance with the recount numbers. The CEO prepared his report and it was not in accordance with the recount numbers. In employment law, that is a failure to follow a lawful instruction. And failure to follow lawful instruction, depending on what it is, serious misconduct. Depending on the nature of the instruction and nature of what you did, a serious misconduct.
And just a little clarification there, Council. Just a minute, Yog. Are any orders expected to be issued by the Caribbean Court of Justice tomorrow, or is it that they're just being asked for an opinion? I see different opinions coming out on this.
I had a look at the notice of application which went before them. So the document that is asking for the orders filed by the PBP, and that document asks for the decision of the Court of Appeal to be set aside. That's the only order that it asks for. Doesn't ask for anything else.
Right. So, which is correct. I mean, that's all you need the CCJ to do in the first place, because I think a lot of persons, I mean, Council, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but a lot of persons have questioned the Court of Appeal and the decision it made, and of course tomorrow we'll know the positives or negatives of that. You yourself had rightly pointed that this is why you have superior courts, because courts can make a decision that can be overturned or upheld at the superior level. Council, I want to take you back a little bit. A moment ago, you did say, and I don't disagree with you, but representing the voice of a lot of Guyanese at this stage, I want to put this question to you. You said earlier that, no one is above the law. The president of Guyana, in some way, is above the law. He's immune to prosecution depending on his making a decision as president of the country. Is it right to say he's above the law, or is there another way to put it? I know you're going to come with he's immune, right?
No. This is my view. My view is that the president He's immune from prosecution or filing a civil case against him, but things done in the um, course of office of the president. I can't remember the exact words that have been used, but if the president goes out into the street, or any president, not necessarily this one, I can't see this one doing that. If a president of Guyana goes out into the street and starts killing people, that's not something done in the course of his office as president, is it? If he starts taking all of the money from the consolidated fund, putting it into his bank account, that's not something done in the course of the presidency, is it? So I think that modern courts are going to interpret that immunity section in the Constitution to mean that reasonable things. You do things, art. If you declare war on a country, that's something that the court would be very, very reluctant to interfere with that sort of decision, right? Whether the president should have declared war or not.
Correct.
Circumstances, courts are not going to get involved in that. President doing something, taking some other military action or ordering some police action or something like that. Courts are not going to get involved in that. But as you go lower down the scale, depending on what the president does, surely some things are not in the course of the office of the president. Murdering people on the street.
Yes, ordering if he orders the killing of somebody, yes, that would be illegal.
Yes,
I
like
think
what
that's
happened with
what's
Mr. Bautese. Mr. Bautese is alleged to have killed a number of people. 15
Correct.
people participated in the killing of them. In Guyana, I don't see how any court could find that immunity extended to something like that. So you're immune from things done in office which are related to the exercise of the office of the president. Not
That's right. That's right. You see, the reason why I've raised this is
if I can interrupt you, Yog, just this idea, something comes to my mind. In the Marcel Gaskin case concerning the appointment of the chairman of the Elections Commission, Chief Justice George ruled that the president had to provide reasons for his decision. Now, the Constitution doesn't say anywhere, and the president did question it. He said, where in the Constitution does it say that I have to provide reasons? But that is the type of law that is developing, has been developing since the 1970s, that things have to be more open and more transparent, and people are subject to standards of reasonableness.
Correct.
When you make a decision which does not appear to have any sort of principle behind it, you must provide your reasons so that people can see that what you did was above board. Now, you could say that that is a sort of immunity that the president could claim, that I can do what I want and I don't have to provide reasons. But here it was that the High Court, the Chief Justice, said that the president must provide reasons for his decisions. He is duty bound to provide reasons. I'm sorry, Yoga, I interrupted you.
Sure. I want to take it a step further because there is a discussion going on in this country that one of the probabilities would be that, if let's say we have another month to go, let us just say the CCJ makes a decision and blah, 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 and things fall in place and Mr. Lowenfield is replaced and that declaration is made and Mr. Ali is sworn in and Granger has a month more to go to stay in power and then so forth and so on. And, the president can do, we have learned from the USA where Mr. Trump has given pardon or has in a way either promised directly or indirectly pardon of the persons who did things based on what they thought the president wanted them to do. And here it is, we have a situation where the state machinery has come out to back Lowenfield. Notwithstanding there is a criminal case going to the court, the state machinery, the Guyana RAG, has today published something to say, Lowenfield, we got your back. The head of the state is Mr. Granger. The state mouthpiece that comes under Mr. Granger's employ directly under the Prime Minister's remit is the Guyana RAG that has published this. Does that follow logic, sir?
Does the state machinery saying that I don't know how far up it comes, but the president can only pardon somebody who is convicted of something. If Mr. Lowenfield is not convicted of anything, he can be pardoned.
Correct.
He can be pardoned. The DPP has the power to withdraw the charge. and that power is subject to being challenged. The exercise of that power is subject to being challenged in court. There was a case from Fiji, I think it was Mauritius, where a man was filing private criminal charges against a minister, I believe it was. He filed a set of private criminal charges. The DPP withdrew them. He filed it again. The DPP withdrew it. He filed it again. The DPP withdrew it. And he took her to court and said, "Look, you can't just withdraw these cases. You have to act reasonably and give reasons and that kind of thing." So the court said yes, the DPP couldn't just do what he or she wanted. It had to be within the confines of the law. So although the DPP has what appears to be unfettered powers, wide powers to withdraw any charge, they have to give reasons in some instances. They have to act reasonably and lawfully when they do so. So only the DPP can withdraw private criminal charges, and that right of withdrawal is subject to the law.
Great.
The president can't, as far as I know, the president can't withdraw charges. The president can grant a pardon to anybody who has been convicted of an offense, but you have to have been convicted first.
Of course. Well, I think it's in, many people don't doubt that there will be some kind of a conviction for Mr. Lowenfield, who has surpassed the infamy of Mingo with one move. Counsel, earlier today, Senior Counsel Ralph Ramkarran, who heads the presidential candidate for a new in Guyana, while saying that he anticipated a favorable ruling from the CCJ, he also said that there is a remedy that exists within our laws for a declaration of results without Lowenfield's report. I don't know if you had time to peruse Counsel's writings and thoughts on this, or if you could kindly comment on it, sir. Viewers and listeners, earlier today, just to repeat and put it in perspective, Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, who is a presidential candidate for New and United Guyana, he said that there exists remedy for a declaration of the election's results without Lowenfield's report. Over to you, Kamal.
I believe that I read something like that in Sunday Stabrook. He has a column, Conversation. I think it was there, and I saw something on Newsroom, which was similar today. I think what he's saying is that the Elections Commission has the power under Article 162, it might be 1B, to take such action and issue such instructions for fairness and impartiality. Now, if the chief election officer refuses to do a proper declaration in accordance with the numbers that the declaration should be in accordance with, which we know are the recount numbers, then it is theoretically possible for the Elections Commission to say, we have instructed you to give your advice in your report comprising these numbers. You have refused to do so. We're not going to take any other action against you, but we will do it ourselves. So they can issue such instructions and take such action as will ensure impartiality and fairness. I believe the words were used. I think it's Article 162 of the Constitution. So they can, in theory again, issue their own declaration. Such an exercise of power would be, of course, highly controversial.
How does that conflict with the other section of the same law that would have stated that, is it 177, that shall be deemed president based on advice from a chief elections officer?
Well, if he has refused to give the advice, you remember, if you look at it the other way, the presidential candidate with the larger number of votes cast in his favor, is deemed to be the president, and it is subject to a declaration in that regard, and which is made on the basis of the advice. So three things are happening. Number one, the man gets the most votes. Number two, well, it happens in reverse. Number one, the chief election officer gives his advice. Number two, the chairman makes a declaration. Number three, the declaration is made in favor of the man with the most votes. Now, if you look at it in the reverse, the man with the most votes is entitled to the declaration and he's entitled to the advice. So if you say, we all know that this man here got the most votes, you have to give your advice in accordance with what we know the numbers are, and you don't give your advice in accordance with what the numbers are, and you persistently refuse to give your advice in accordance with what we know the objective numbers are, then the power is exercisable in order for impartiality and fairness to be met. As I said, this power would be highly controversial.
Right. Here is the other side of the coin. Mr. Lowenfield, it may be on a hot spot at this stage. If he proceeds to give a report using the recount numbers, is he not implicating himself in a way against his own actions in the past? Is he not putting himself in trouble?
Well, you see, this is the beautiful thing about technology. He has said so on video. This is not 1970. This is not 1973. This is a different age. We have him on video saying X, Y, Z, and now, in direct contradiction to X, Y, Z, he is saying and doing ABC. How do you justify that? How is it possible for that to be justified? There it is, in Technicolor, as they used to say, him saying what he said.
Right. And Consul, the other issue we have, and why I'm asking you this, because a lot of persons are coming up with these theories, of course. The longer this election takes, the more conspiracy theories will be there. That Lowenfield has to, he's almost obliged to now cover the bases, because if Lowenfield is to declare what everybody knows to be the actual and factual results of these elections, it means he has literally put Mingo and everybody else under his watch there now up for prosecution, because
including himself.
He's now going to declare,
including himself.
Yeah, including himself, of course. But it's like he is damned if you do, damned if you don't. I'm sorry to be pushing you on the same question, but there is a theory out there that Lowenfield will continue to perverse the course or the law to suit what he feels will provide him and his cohorts a cover, knowing that if they're caught out and taken to court, as long as APNO AFC remains in government, they will be pardoned by the president.
Well, you know, the Trinidad Prime Minister said, I have a feeling that this is not going to end well unless APNO AFC decides voluntarily to leave office, or some foreign power does something, whether by sanctions or whatever, to force them to leave office. They're not going to leave office voluntarily. I don't see that happening. You don't come this far. Mr. Lowenfield is not going to issue a report like that, knowing that in 2 weeks the PVP will be in power. He wouldn't do it. He has to believe somewhere that he is protected, somehow that he is protected from prosecution, that there are no negative consequences to him from issuing such a report, from throwing away 115,000 votes.
And would you dare to
and
look at some of those consequences?
Leonard, that is the mic drop moment. That is the greatest fear that this country has, that regardless of what happens, Mr. Lowenfield will perverse the course of the law, and his natural duties will subvert everything you could think of, because he has been offered protection. Now, the other thing, Leonard, that I want to ask your comment on, I know you're my co-host, but of course, I have the right to question you, Mr. Senior Journalist, and to, of course, ask counsel's advice after you, of course. There are a number of persons, ladies and gentlemen, who over the past couple of days got more money from this government to go join a picket exercise than they got over the past 5 years. because people are being paid to do this. People are being paid to criticize the CARICOM and criticize CCJ. People who are being paid by taxpayers' dollar, running various state-owned companies, are using that taxpayers' money to go criticize CARICOM and criticize CCJ. Taxpayers' money being used to put an advertisement in the Trinidadian Guardian to criticize the CCJ. And I tell you what, the day must come when we must demand, and if Mr. Accountant General is listening, sir, the taxpayers of this country demanding to see who has paid the Chronicle, the Guyana Rag to carry that ad, who has paid NCN to continue to broadcast all of APNU AFC's live so-called sessions. Who is paying for that airtime? This country demands an answer. Leonard, you are a journalist. You're working with Kaieteur News. Does any political parties get free space and free airtime, sir?
Not that I'm aware of. I'll have to ask Glendale that. I'm not aware that anybody would have been given any free ride with this newspaper here. If it was done in a very quiet, very sinister way. We have a very open policy here at the newspaper that the staffers, including the reporters, insist during our meetings to know almost everything that's happening that could impact us. That is as much as I could say. Glendale would have made it very clear to anybody who want to ask him with regards to policies of Kaieteur News, call him directly online, and he never ever fails to answer. I'm not aware of anything like
but
that.
Leonard, let me put this to the viewers and listeners. It is important people understand this. The Guyana Rag, people don't buy it out there, you know. Nobody buys the newspapers. Here is how the newspaper gets sales. All the government offices are forced to take so much copies of the Guyana Rag every day. In other words, it's a double dip. They're being funded by taxpayers' money, and the offices that you and I are paying their salaries for, those offices gotta now use our taxpayer money to buy the rag which our money is being paying for. So they're double, triple dipping on the taxpayers in this country to spew the kind of nonsense they're spewing. I will insist. I know that even Donald Ramkarran has come in the room 592 and he too believes that there is a space for state-owned media. We have to defund the Guyana Rag. We have to defund the state-owned media. Media must belong to private entities. They can pay for the airtime to carry whatever they want because it's a zero-sum game. You're still paying for all of these taxpayers, paying for the paper, for the staffers, for the everything. Well, let us take this by the time from privately owned people and do that rather than have this kind of nonsense that's going on. Sorry to be carrying on at this in your presence, Council, but it is something where Guyanese are really being taken for a ride. Nobody, Council, I don't know how many people you would know that's buying the Guyana Rag, but
I actually buy it, Yog.
Well, there you go.
The man buys it.
And we have
Chronicle
to,
in Scarborough.
and you're buying it. And you're buying it for a purpose because you need to see what's going on because you can be prosecuted.
No, but your
law firm could be facing certain things.
But
come Leonard, back, by and large,
yeah.
Yes, go on.
Coming back to that mic drop moment that you were talking about, what would give Keith Lowen feel that comfort, that level of comfort that believes that he could tender those purported figures that he tendered and believe he could get away with it? What kind of comfort would you have that would allow you to do something like that?
You're asking Council, I presume.
I asking both of y'all. I mean, I would like to hear. I think the people would like to hear because I don't know. We're talking some scenarios here.
I don't think council would want to comment on such hypotheses without any statistical analysis to make a good
But
presentation.
it's something
Council,
to
would
think
you dare
about, though.
to
It's something to
comment on
think
it?
about. Why would you throw away your career? Let me
But
just ask it there, Yog. You probably don't
yes,
want to ask it. The council don't want to ask it. Why you're the chief elections officer, the most senior man probably after the chairperson there, and you're the one that's carrying out the operational part of GCOM, and you would put in jeopardy your entire career, your legacy that you probably would have had through the army, and then you're
Leonard,
sitting at the most important. Why
turn
would
it
you do that?
around. Turn it around, my friend. Turn it around. It's not why you would want to throw away your career. It's finally you're revealing your true self. This is what these people are.
But
If
throwing away
at
your
this
career,
define,
throwing
yes,
away a career is
go
one
on,
thing.
sir.
Doing it in the full face of the public is quite another thing. So you have to look at that as well. This is not somebody doing something illegal or corrupt in a back room somewhere that nobody can see and nobody might ever see. This is somebody doing something in the full eye of not only the Guyanese public, but the public all over the world. These elections are in the Washington Post, in the Economist, all over the world. So this is what could tempt somebody to do that. I don't know. I don't know what could tempt me to do
Correct.
that. So I don't know what has been promised or what has been given.
And just to get the perspectives in order, ladies and gentlemen, let us repeat. We cannot repeat this enough. The perspective, the truth has to be repeated because there's so much lies that's being driven down our throats every day that we have to repeat this so that we can keep it in perspective. Listen, what has happened is that during this recount period, only APNO AFC would have made certain allegations. And mind you, many of those persons of the APNO AFC that were in the recount center were being paid salary by taxpayers while they were there. We'll come to that in another time. They raised certain allegations, certain objections during this recount. And when they raised those allegations and when they raised those objections, they asked GCOM to verify whether those persons voted or not. The observers present also asked GCOM, can we see, can we verify, just so that there is not another Mingo sitting over there. GCOM refused an independent verification as to whether those persons voted or not. GCOM, let me repeat, GCOM refused to allow an independent verification of whether those people voted or not. So all we have at this stage is APNO AFC saying these people voted. We don't know whether they voted or not. No court has heard that. No judge has heard that. No petition has been made. Lowenfield is the only man that heard that. And Lowenfield said, oh, if APNO AFC said you didn't vote, then you could not have voted. And thus, Lowenfield made that decision based on what we don't know, but based on the presumption that whatever APNO AFC instructed him to do, he is doing that. That is the only logical reason here, because he has no other basis upon which to disqualify a vote. He disqualified a vote based on APNO AFC instructing him to do so. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is 4 months after the elections. I want to remind you of something else just before I ask council's view on it. It is Granger who invited CARICOM, and it is Granger's party who took it to court to say, no, this can happen. It is Granger who said we're going to abide with whatever the chairman declares. It is Granger's party who was taking every step of the process to court. It is Granger who said this election was well run and we are proud of it. And it is Granger who later said, what SOPs? I never saw an SOP. I only saw a spreadsheet. Granger himself said he only saw a spreadsheet. So, ladies and gentlemen, the observation report was only by one set of observation, APNO AFC. and Lowenfield took their instructions and he has disqualified votes. Council, we have a situation, a potential situation where the chairman of GCOM is in a place where no human being should ever be. Nobody, I think, envies her position at this stage. Nobody wants to be in Claudette Singh's position because Claudette Singh's own, the commission's employees have decided to be purposive against making her job easy. Council, ultimately, do you see this being left solely to the hands, unfortunately, of the chairman?
I think that in the end, the chairman has to make the decision. Remember, the commission is split along political lines, 3 government, 3 opposition. So the chairman has to decide what she wants to do and do it. And that is the only way that it can end. Otherwise, it can end properly. Depending on what she does, one or the other will be sworn in as president. It lies entirely in her hands, and her hands alone. You can get court cases to compel people to do this and to set aside this or that decision. But at the end of the day, the chairman has to do something.
So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're not going to go up to 9. We're actually going to be closing off at 8:30. We got some stuff to do. We got some tidying up to do. And we wish to apologize that we do have an issue in the Berbice end and we are working on it. We know that tomorrow is the CCJ's decision. It is my humble opinion that whatever way the CCJ decides, it really does not, should not, and ought not to affect GCOM making a speedy declaration of these elections. Of course, they now are on stay until tomorrow, but thereafter, they have to proceed and proceed rapidly with the declaration based on the recount results. Council, I'm going to hand over to you for your comments as we're going to close room early tonight. But ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you, tomorrow we are going to listen and Kaito Radio will be bringing to you live the coverage from the CCJ at 3. I know that Mr. Gildarie will be having his elections watch, Leonard, from 1:30?
Yeah, from 1:30, yourself and myself, and we're going to be there until about 3 when we cut in for that coverage.
Correct. So at 3 tomorrow will be the coverage from the CCJ. And tomorrow night we have no other than attorney at law, Mr. Anil Nandlal, joining us in room 592 to discuss whatever is the outcome of the CCJ's hearing tomorrow. So ladies and gentlemen, we certainly look forward to that. Council, I'm going to hand over to you for your closing thoughts on what we are looking ahead to for tomorrow, knowing that the decision can go any way. But of course, for your sage thinking, level-headed thinking on what is GCOM's next steps from tomorrow afternoon.
Well, Yog, this was never a legal issue. This is a simple issue of numbers, and it is a political issue. Sometimes there are some batsmen in cricket, when they're out, they walk, and others wait for the finger to go up. Well, when you're out, you're out. You either walk or you wait for the finger. But you always know that you're out. And what's happening here is that the APNU AFC party is moving slowly out of the legal sphere and into a place where they don't want to go. As it is, they can say we are doing what the law allows us to do. Cases are permitted to be filed. The courts have jurisdiction over these issues to deal with them, but they're moving away from it. Now, the throwing away of 115,000 votes is not something that you can find a law to justify. So we're either going to go back to following the law and APNU AFC rebuilding themselves as a viable opposition with the possibility of coming back into government in 5 years or 10 years, whenever the case may be, or they're going to move away from the lawful method and into something from which there is no return. This is not 1970. This is the same situation does not exist in the world that existed when Mr. Burnham was in government. The world is completely different. Those who do not realize it will soon find out that there are consequences to acting outside of the law. The entire world is concerned with countries following democratic practices. And it is a human right to be able to cast your vote and for that vote to be counted. We subscribe to certain charters which say that every citizen has the right to freely elect their government. It is the world's business, and any country does not permit that. I hope, I'm an eternal optimist, and I hope that after tomorrow, whatever the decision is, we move within the law. A declaration is made in accordance with the results of the votes which have been cast by the people of Guyana, and that we get back to the business of running our country so that my children and my child, I have one child, and your children can all live in a country where things work. I hope that's where we're going, and if it isn't, well, it's very unfortunate. You're on mute.
Let's certainly hope so. Let's certainly, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it from Mr. Kamal Ramkarran, attorney at law. And just so that you know, he has outlined to us what are the possibilities of the different types of decisions that could be made tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll certainly have a further assessment of those decisions after they would have occurred. Tomorrow night, joining us in room 592 will be Mr. Anil Nandalal to discuss the outcome of the CCJ's decision tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, this country does not belong to the politicians. It belongs to you and I, every single one of us, of every single race and religion and creed. We all belong to this country as a people together. Let us stop allowing the politicians to divide us. It is only the people and our votes that can create and break a government. And it is time we keep reminding the politicians that our votes must count. I don't care who you are, whichever political party you are, it's the people's vote that must count. So ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you in room 592 tonight. And we certainly wish you a wonderful remainder of the night. Stay safe wherever you are. And remember, do a prayer for this beautiful country of ours. And we pray tonight, may God bless our leaders, and may all the hard hearts find some way of repentance. Ladies and gentlemen, do have a great night. Goodbye from room 592.
Good night.
COVID-19 tips sponsored by Dex Soap. 1. Practice social distancing. 2. Wear your mask when leaving the house. 3. Wash your hands regularly for 20 seconds using our Dex Soap. 4. Cover your nose and mouth with a disposable tissue or flex elbow when you cough or sneeze. Choose Dex Soap for that extra cleanliness. Dex Soap is affordable and available nationwide.